My name is Sarah, and I've always lived in the city. Last summer, my boyfriend Lucas suggested we spend a weekend in a cabin deep in Blackwood Forest. He thought it would be a great way to escape from everything, just us and nature. At first, I didn't like the idea, but I eventually agreed. The cabin was old and hidden in a clearing, surrounded by tall trees that seemed to watch over us. There was no cell signal or internet, just an old landline phone and a radio that barely worked. Lucas loved the isolation, but I felt uneasy the whole time. That first night, the forest was strangely quiet. As the wind picked up, the silence felt heavier. Around midnight, I heard a soft tapping sound. At first, I thought it was tree branches hitting the windows, but when I looked, the trees were still. The tapping continued. Light, steady knocks, as if someone was gently tapping on the cabin walls. I felt a chill, but I tried to brush it off. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, the feeling of being watched crept in. I checked the locks on the doors and windows twice, but the cabin still felt too open, too exposed, as if something was outside, waiting for us. At around 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly. The room was dark, lit only by a bit of moonlight. The tapping had returned, louder this time, coming from the front door. My heart raced as I lay there, listening to the sound. The tapping stopped after a few minutes, and the cabin became completely silent, but the sense that something was nearby never went away. I eventually fell asleep again, but the next morning, the feeling of unease stayed with me. As we hiked through the woods that day, I kept feeling like we were being watched. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound made me nervous. That night, the tapping got worse. It came from all around the cabin, the windows, the walls, even the ceiling. It felt like someone or something was trying to get inside. The knocks got faster and louder. The fear was overwhelming, making the night feel endless. At some point, I must have fallen asleep out of exhaustion. When I woke up just before dawn, the tapping had stopped, but the room was cold. I reached over, but Lucas was gone. Panic hit me when I saw the bedroom door slightly open. The dresser we had pushed in front of it was moved aside. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The cabin was completely still. My heart pounded as I searched for Lucas, but he was nowhere to be found. That's when I saw it. Scratched into the wooden floor near the front door were words, hurriedly carved but clear. My heart raced as the tapping echoed around the cabin, growing louder with each beat. I turned the flashlight toward the walls, searching for the source of the sound. Shadows danced in the beam of light, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure flicker just beyond my sight. I stepped back, the cold creeping in around me. Every instinct told me to run, but I couldn't leave without Lucas. I called his name again, but only silence answered. The air felt thick and heavy, as if the cabin itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Then I heard it, a low whisper, almost lost in the sound of the tapping. It seemed to come from the direction of the front door. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I approached, flashlight trembling in my hand. The whispers grew clearer, forming words that sent chills down my spine. "Let us in. We can help you." My breath caught in my throat. I backed away, my mind racing. Who were they? What did they want? The tapping intensified, frantic now, as if they were growing impatient. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. Suddenly, I remembered the old landline phone. If I could get to it, maybe I could call for help. I turned and hurried toward the small kitchen where the phone was. But as I passed the front door, it burst open with a loud crash, swinging wide against the wall. The air grew icy, and the whispers turned into an angry chorus. I froze, unable to move. Shapes began to form in the doorway, dark figures with indistinct features, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. They stepped forward, shadows creeping toward me. With a surge of adrenaline, I bolted toward the kitchen, grabbing the phone and frantically dialing. The line crackled, and I could barely hear anything over the chaos unfolding behind me. The shadows were getting closer, the whispers louder, demanding to be let in. I shouted into the phone, calling for help, but the line went dead. In a panic, I dropped it, turning to face the approaching darkness. The figures loomed over me, their presence suffocating. Just when I thought I would be consumed by the shadows, I spotted the door to the basement. I dashed toward it, yanking it open and slipping inside, slamming it shut behind me. The darkness enveloped me, and I fumbled for the light switch, my hands shaking. The bare bulb flickered on, illuminating the dusty, cluttered space filled with old furniture and forgotten memories. I backed away from the door. I could still hear the whispers and tapping, but now It was muffled, as if the figures were trying to break through. I glanced around, searching for something, anything, to defend myself. In the corner, I spotted an old wooden chair. I grabbed it and positioned myself against the door, ready to hold it closed. The whispers became frantic, echoing in the small space. "Let us in. We just want to help." As the door rattled violently, I pressed my back against it, my heart racing. The shadows were trying to push through, but the chair held firm. Would I be stuck here forever, trapped in this cabin with whatever was outside? Suddenly, the rattling stopped. An eerie silence fell over the basement. I held my breath, listening. For a moment, I thought I was safe, but then a low voice broke the silence. "Help us, please." I realized the voices weren't just demanding, they were pleading. I had to know what they wanted. With a deep breath, I released the chair and stepped away from the door. The shadows surged forward, but I stood my ground, ready to face whatever was coming. The door creaked open slowly, revealing the dark figures. They hovered just beyond the threshold, their forms indistinct but filled with a sense of desperation. Help us find peace," they whispered. "We were trapped here long ago, lost in the woods. You are the only one who can help us move on." I hesitated. They looked so lost, so desperate. I knew I had to make a choice. The cabin had felt like a prison, but perhaps it was also a place of healing. I stepped forward, holding my hand out. "How can I help you?" The shadows shifted closer, and a warmth spread through the room, filling the cold air. "You must free us from this place," they whispered. "You must acknowledge our pain, and we can finally move on." I closed my eyes, feeling their presence surround me. I focused on the stories they carried: loss, regret, longing. I spoke softly, acknowledging their suffering, promising to remember them, to tell their stories. The shadows swirled around me, their whispers turning from desperation to gratitude. Slowly, the figures began to fade, their forms dissipating into the air. The room grew warm, filled with a soft light. I opened my eyes, and the basement was empty. The oppressive weight lifted. With a sigh of relief, I walked back up the stairs, emerging into the cabin's living room. The sunlight poured in through the windows, illuminating the space. Everything felt different now, lighter, freer. I stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the fresh forest air. The darkness had been lifted, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I glanced back at the cabin, grateful for the experience, but ready to leave it behind. As I walked away, I knew the stories of the lost souls would remain with me, woven into the very fabric of the forest. I would carry their memories, sharing them with the world. I could finally leave Blackwood Forest behind, but the lessons I learned there would stay with me forever.